Here we go. Please wait until 10 o'clock to start.
Good morning. It's 10 a.m. in Tuscaloosa, and I'd like to welcome you to this month's webinar from the University of Alabama Safe State Program. I'm Randy Easterling. I'm the Safety Program Supervisor here, and I appreciate you taking the time to attend this webinar on what I think will be a very useful topic, especially to a lot of us safety and health people. More and more we're dealing with the E in EHS than just the safety and health portion. And today we're going to have Kaylin Q, our Environmental Services Manager here at UA Safe State, do a basic presentation on Stormwater 101 for industrial and commercial and construction sectors. I think we'll all find this very useful, and the last one Kaylin did was very well received. So at this point in time, I'd like to welcome Kaylin to take over the stage and present for the next 45 minutes. As again, if you have questions, you please use the chat feature and we will answer those toward the end of the question or somewhere in the middle, but more toward the end. With that, we have Kaylin coming forward. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kaylin Tew, and part of what I do at Safe State is we do stormwater compliance audits. In addition to that, I used to be a qualified credential inspector at my previous job for industrial facilities and construction facilities. So I'm really excited. This is a fun topic for me. I'm going to turn off my camera so I can focus on the slides. But yeah, so we're going to get into it. Let me make sure, get my camera off. And all right, so the main things that we're going to go over today, first, just the basic water cycle and what waters of the US are defined as under the MPDS program. We're going to go over stormwater regulations related to both the industrial and the construction stormwater sectors. We're going to go over MPDS permitting and the whole program for stormwater, the difference between stormwater at sites and your wastewater, how to develop a stormwater prevention pollution plan, the proper BMPs that are a part of this plan, go over some common pollutants, and then lastly, we'll touch on SPCC plans. So just a basic introduction to the water cycle here. This is pretty common, but basically we've got our oceans. The water will evaporate from the oceans, condensate into cloud cover. These clouds will eventually lead to rainfall, which is our precipitation that leads to some surface runoff. It can also go into groundwater. We're going to be focusing on the surface runoff today, so that rainfall hitting your site and then running off site, causing any kind of issues. So looking at a few examples here, this is an industrial facility. We can see in the top left corner, there's a drain on the site. So anything that is on their site that rainwater can touch can be drained off from their parking lots, from their different facility areas, go into drain conveyances, and it could be somewhere like dumping into a river like we see in this top thing. So basically, if you see this no dumping sign, drains to river, that means there's no treatment before it gets there. And this is an issue because we use the water so much. I mean, we need it to drink, we need it to eat. It's fun for recreation as well. We want good quality water. And if you have industrial facilities or construction sites that are polluting the waters, then you have a lot of issues with that, such as turbidity. We can see in the top left here, we've got a lot of sediment, which can cause fish kills. We've got trash and debris that just makes it look ugly and also is bad for the environment. And also it could be hidden. You can have chemicals in the water that makes it impossible to eat the fish because they concentrate these chemicals in their system. So it's important to know that the Clean Water Act prevents anybody from discharging what they call pollutants through a point source into a water of the US unless they have an MPDS permit. And we're going to go over the definitions of all those in red, starting with waters of the US. So this is a lot of jumble. Basically what it is, if any water is used in interstate or foreign commerce, can be traveled, is part of the ebb and flow of the tide, or is a wetland, or a tributary of any of these things, or even your territorial seas, then that's considered a water of the US. Some examples of this, rivers are going to obviously be one. We've got barges traveling through here, commerce is going on actively, but one you might not think of is just your simple creeks right outside your facilities. These are tributaries to these bigger streams. So if we've got pollutants here, they're eventually going to end up in the bigger waterways. This is true even if they are cement lined. So cement line conveyances are still considered a water of the US, as well as our wetlands. So here's a picture of that here. And something like this, which you might not think of, if it even has intermittent flow, so in high rainfall events it flows, that is considered a water of the US. This one here is not going to be a water of the US. What we've got here is an area that's enclosed on a single property for a single person's use. So that would not be classified. But it gets a little trickier when you get to bigger lakes or things like this. This could be spanning multiple properties or used by multiple people, and that then becomes a water of the US. So that kind of gives you an overview of some different ways that waters of the US are defined. And now we're going to get into what the permitting is related to that. So that MPDS permit. This basically means your National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. It's a program that addresses treatment and discharge of any pollutants to a WOTUS. So WOTUS is that water of the US. This is for both wastewater and stormwater. And again, we're going to be focusing on stormwater in this presentation. The MPDS permit will limit what you can discharge. There are monitoring requirements and reporting requirements related to these discharges. And there are also other provisions in there to help protect your water quality and public health because of this. At a federal level, our statutory code is the United States Code, which is Title 33, Chapter 26. And the regulations are located in Title 40, Part 122 and 125. For states, in most cases, this is who's going to be actually managing and regulating your MPDS permitting. However, the federal EPA does give permits for projects within these states and Washington, D.C. American territories such as Puerto Rico, any tribal lands within states, and some tribal lands will manage their own, so that's important to know as well. Some parts of some states, the Denali National Park and Preserve in Alaska, and some areas in Oklahoma and Texas. So these are going to be the federally operated ones. The rest are going to be covered by the state environmental agency. All right, so we've gone over the permitting itself. Now we need to determine who's actually covered under this. The MPDS permitting system applies to all of these sectors on the right here. So our municipals, our MS4s, which are our municipal separate stormwater systems, concentrated animal feeding operations, vessel discharges, combined sewer overflow, and the two we're focusing on today are the construction stormwater and the industrial process wastewater and stormwater. So if you're the construction or industrial facility and you discharge directly into a water of the US, you're definitely going to be regulated. If you're discharging into a sanitary sewer, you might not have one, but your municipality may have permitting requirements that you need to follow. If you're discharging into an MS4, so that municipal separate stormwater system, you may need a permit depending on what you discharge. So just to show what this is actually looking like, we're focusing on the left side of the photo here. The light blue conveyance is a MS4, so our municipal separate stormwater. Basically, all your stormwater is not treated. It flows off your site, goes into the drains, and goes straight to a water body. The other one here is our municipal sewer system, where it will be connected to a treatment plant and treated before discharged. So again, who is anybody for industrial? It's defined by if you have a primary SIC code of the facility that is identified in the regulations, which are 40 CFR 122, the facility is subject to the stormwater permit application requirements. For construction, if you're disturbing over more than 1 acre of land or less than 1 acre of land, but it's part of a common development. So if you're doing a neighborhood development and you're disturbing one house at a time, that's still going to be needing an MPDS permit. Next, to define a pollutant. The Clean Water Act broadly defines pollutants. It can be a lot of different things. I'll point out some here: dredged spoil, solid waste, residue, sewage, garbage. And at the bottom here, you'll notice rock, sand, and cellar dirt. So dirt is considered a pollutant because it will mess up the waterways, cause fish gills to not be able to breathe properly, and kill off organisms that are important to the environment. So both your chemicals and just your dirt are pollutants. So the most common pollutants of concern that's seen in a permit is total suspended solids, which is anything that's just entrained in your water. Oxygen demand materials, which are ones that take oxygen away from the water body, which leads to a lot of plant growth, but not a lot of ability of animals to survive. We also have our hydrocarbons, temperature, which is one a lot of people don't think of. If it is too hot or too cold, you can shock a system very easily. pH, turbidity. So turbidity is just your sediment load, and pesticides as well. So spills and leaks are going to be your largest source of industrial stormwater pollution. And that's because if you don't clean these up immediately and it rains, all of that stuff is flowing off site to your nearest water body. And if this is going through a point source, that's when it's defined in the Clean Water Act as needing a permit. So a point source is any discernible, defined, and discrete conveyance. So here we're seeing pipes with a clear or a dark pollutant coming out of an individual pipe. So that can be traced back to a facility. Or here on the right, we've got some sediment that's entering a water body, and it's possibly some rusty material as well. So that can tell you just from checking that conveyance what facility discharged. Some other evidence of this, we've got our channelized systems that are conveying it to a discrete point, and our drains as well. So non-point sources are not covered as under this MPDS permitting rule, but they are required to be regulated under other portions of the Clean Water Act. So a non-point source just means it's a very broad area and not easily tracked. So deforesting or irrigation, these are going to be ones that are non-point sources. All right, so after we get through all that, we're going to discuss the industrial MPDS permits, and then we'll go into construction after that. The industrial thing, the main thing to know is we're looking at only the stormwater today. There's also wastewater permitting. And to give you the difference, stormwater obviously is just rainfall, flowing off site, collecting any contaminants you have on site. Wastewater is going to be something that's either directly related in your process. So here we've got our process wastewater. This is an example from the pulp and paper industry. We're looking at the making of pulp from wood, and water inputs are going into every step of this process. And because they are interacting with the material on site, they must be treated before they can be discharged. This is a process wastewater. We also have non-process wastewaters. So these are any from your utilities on site, such as your boiler blowdown, maybe AC condensate, any of that water. And wastewater not associated with specific processes as well. So if you're irrigating your site or you have landscaping, that could be a time when you would have this type of water going on. So both of these are the non-process and the process are wastewaters covered under a different permit than your stormwater. But it's important to know with this, if you do produce wastewater, we're looking at two examples here, both of washing equipment in the side of the building. If they're using any kind of soapy material, plus all of the contaminants that they're washing off of the trucks, and they don't clean it up once they're done, if it rains, then all of that material is again washed off site, and then that becomes a stormwater issue. So you have to be careful how your wastewater does interact with your stormwater to verify that you don't need a permit for it. There is an option for MPDS permitting for industrial facilities for no exposure. So if you have no industrial materials and activities that are exposed to rain, snow, or snowmelt, or any kind of runoff, then you can apply for this no exposure. And we can see here 2 examples that might make this happen. So if all of your totes and everything are completely covered and have secondary containment, then you're not going to have an issue with interaction with stormwater. In order to get this, it's Form 35010, 3510-11, which is the no exposure certification from the EPA. In order to have this, you must sign a no exposure certification statement. You must submit this every 5 years, and anytime the permitting authority can come out and check your facility to verify that this statement is true. So it's important that you don't falsely claim this, because that can lead to a lot of regulatory issues down the line. And also for industrial, there are 2 major types of permits. We've got individual and general. An individual permit, these are issued case by case. It's going to be specific to your facility or factory based on the processes that you have there. This is appropriate if you've got a facility that's very large and complex with a bunch of different processes that aren't really covered under one SIC code. A general permit can cover multiple facilities in the same category of dischargers. So those same SIC codes that have the standard discharges that would be expected from that type of facility, they can be covered under a general permit that ADEM or whatever regulatory body you have will issue based on that. This is really cost effective for the state agencies, because then you have a large number of facilities under the same permit. You don't have to generate new wording, new processes, or any kind of different limits for what can be discharged based on a singular facility. All right, so that's the basics of industrial. We're going to switch over to construction now. For a construction facility, it's important to know that a lot of your activities are exposed to water because you do not have some type of cover over you. So you cannot apply for a no exposure certification under construction activities. You can see here a couple of examples of where you might have stormwater that interacts with your site. So we've got at the top right some erosion from excavation area. That sediment is going to be transferred to that water body in the back there because there's nothing protecting the area from that transfer. Something that I see a lot is porta potties on sites, especially in neighborhoods, where they'll sit it on a flat area, which is typically on top of the storm drain. So if that were to tip over, or if it were to rain, any contaminants that are related to this would go straight down the storm drain. So that's definitely a big no-no. And down at the bottom, we've got a concrete washout area here. So this is a good idea in theory. You've got it sealed, you've got some liner, but clearly it's fallen into disrepair, and that concrete is just going to go right off site the first rainfall. Some other options, if you have equipment on site that are leaking oil or any other kind of material, that can be easily entrained in your stormwater. And then your debris, so both your trash within your dumpsters and just debris loose on site, that's going to be an issue. So you want to keep your dumpsters covered. Your debris is good to have a tarp over it. And also for the dumpsters, be sure that you've got it sealed at the bottom so that it's not leaking. For construction requirement, there is this called the C&D rule. So for the C&D rule for permitting of MPDS for construction and stormwater, you must meet the minimum federal effluent limitation guidelines. And this is for the construction and development in a point source category. So again, those discrete conveyances. So these minimum effluent limitations are you need to design, install, and maintain effective erosion and sediment controls. That's one of the major issues at a construction site, because a lot of time you do have open pits or an excavation area that you're working out of. You want to be sure that you have pollution prevention measures. So if you do have these areas, how are you preventing it from getting off site? And you also want to destabilize any disturbed areas immediately when construction has ceased. This is a big one when I was going out and doing inspections. That was an issue, because if you know that you're not going to be working in an area of exposed soil or sediment for more than 14 days, you're legally required to cover it. A lot of times this can just be a tarp if you're going to get to it really quickly. If you're done with that area of a construction site, you should grass it and stabilize it so that that's not an issue any longer. The last thing as a part of this is prohibiting dewatering discharges unless it's managed by appropriate control. So if you're dewatering foundations or anything like that, the discharge has to be to a specific conveyance where it can be treated, or you have control measures in place. You also are required to prohibit the discharge of wastewater from concrete washout, which we saw earlier, or any other type of washouts of materials on your site. You have to prevent fuels, oils, and pollutants from your vehicles from going off site, and your soaps or solvents that were used to wash the vehicles as well. So one thing that is not included in the industrial permitting that is something that you have to do for construction stormwater is you must inspect using a construction general permit inspector. This is someone who has completed an EPA construction inspection course and passed the exam, or that holds a current construction inspection certification or a license from a program that covers the same material as the EPA inspection course. And you would have to also pass the EPA exam for this to be considered. There's equivalence within your state. So for Alabama, we have qualified credential inspectors or qualified credential professionals. So a credentialed inspector can survey construction sites, but any reports related to it have to be filled out by a qualified credential professional, which is typically a professional engineer, professional geologist, something like that, that can actually sign off on kind of technical reports. And when you apply for a construction permit, it's important to know that you have to have a notice of intent for construction 14 days prior to any earth disturbing activities at your site. And then when you're finished at the end, you have to submit a notice of termination, because obviously once you're finished, you don't want to keep having to follow any kind of permitting requirements. So once the activities are done and either you have had permanent stabilization of all areas, that means these areas are no longer susceptible to erosion, they've been covered, they've been grassed, or the site has been taken over by another entity. So if you have another crew that's coming in to complete another part of the project, you would transfer the permit over to them. All right, so switching back to both now, for industrial and construction permits, you are required to develop a stormwater pollution prevention plan. And this can be called different things in your state. For the EPA level, this is the name for it. And you'll usually see in Alabama for an industrial facility, it's called the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. For construction sites, it's called the Construction Best Management Practice Plan in Alabama. But the basis of it, you need this because when you submit your NOI, you have to have a plan in place for how you're going to deal with any discharges that occur at your site. And again, different states do have different requirements and may have specific templates they want you to follow for your stormwater pollution prevention plan. So you need to check this before you develop one. The general of a solution or a SWIP is what I'm going to call it. Now, the general process of a SWIP, you're going to want to have a pollution prevention team that's outlined within the plan. These are going to be usually people on site. You want to have whoever your qualified person is to be doing inspections be on this team. You want to have different diversity of knowledge if possible. So maybe if you're on an industrial site, you want to have a maintenance person, someone who works on the floor, and a manager. That would be a good team. On a construction site, that may vary a little bit. Then you'll get into assessing facility processes and any stormwater pollution sources once you've got that team developed. And we'll get into that a little bit on the next slide. You also want to select control measures that will happen in case of these potential stormwater pollution sources getting off site or causing a spill. You want to finally develop inspection, monitoring, and maintenance activities related to all of these control measures and what potential pollution you could have. So for conducting an assessment at your site, it's important to check for the activity, process, and storage area. So all of these, you want to see if there are any pollutant sources that are related to this. So if you have a sediment storage pile on site, is that first rainfall going to be entrained in the stormwater and go off site, or do you have it covered? Any processes that are open to stormwater, any activities that unloading or loading that you're doing, that'll be what you're looking for. And once you've determined the pollutant source, you want to determine what the concerns are related to these pollutants. So what hazards are they going to present if they do get released? And once you've got an assessment kind of this, you can build a site map, which is required for your SWIP. This is an example of a scrap metal and recycling facility. They're showing all of their different activities, their tanks, where their offices and parking areas are. And these arrows here are pointing to the different stormwater conveyances. So how is the stormwater traveling across the site and where is it going to? And you can see they've diverted their stormwater in 2 detention basins. You can see one in the top left here and one at the bottom left. And these will keep the stormwater on site until they can be treated. And then they will go to the outfalls, which is where their streams are. So that's a good system to have here. And like I was saying, they indicated flow direction. And this is very important because if you don't understand where your flow is, you really can't determine where your water is going to go once it leaves the site. So that was one for construction or industrial. Now we're going to look at one for construction. So a map for construction site might be something like this. You'll have your final construction. So they're planning to have a post office here in the middle, which is their proposed building. They included an area of disturbance. So how much are they planning to disturb during this project? They're showing a temporary sediment trap in the top left in blue here. Silt fencing, which basically is one of the BMPs that you can use to contain your silt on site. And they're showing what conveyances and where the stormwater is going. So this is a really good map for that. All right, so once you've kind of built your map, got some idea of it, we're going to look at some of the ways that you might have issues on site that could be marked on your map for maintenance, control measures, that kind of thing. So here we're looking at a shop. Clearly, this is actually one that one of our team members had seen on site. So this is a real place that we've been to, but it's a tank that's clearly open, it's leaking. It appears to have been tried to clean up maybe with kitty litter at some point and they just gave up on it. The problem also, it's not labeled, so we don't know what exactly this is. And outside of the shop, you can see here that they didn't have a good seal on the building. So this stuff is leaking outside. And so when it's inside, it's not a stormwater issue. It's a bad hygiene issue. But the fact that it's going outside, now first rainfall, you've got an issue. Something for either a construction site or for an industrial site that you might see is your equipment or wash pads. So even if you're not using soap, which could be entrained off site, you can see here the constant washing has created an erosion channel that is flowing off site and under their fencing. So that sediment is just getting transported off site constantly because of that. Something else you might see is loading and unloading operations. This is a very common one we see in both construction and industrial facilities. Here we're looking at a rail car that's going to a storage silo. Clearly the seal's not good on this, or whoever is doing the unloading and loading process is not doing a good job of making sure that they're doing it with good practices. So all of the resin pellets are ending up on the ground here. All right, so once you've got an idea of some of your issues, then you can work on your best management practices. So there's 2 major types. We've got our non-structural behavioral measures here. These are your outdoor sweeping policies, spill training, anything that's just kind of general good practices that are more mental than a physical structure. We then have our structural, which are the physical devices. So storm drain filters, or roof over a waste storage area, or secondary containment. These are all structural ways to prevent anything from happening. Some structural ones that you might see, these are storm drain filters and inlet protection. These are really good for drains on site. You can, if you know that this is also a temporary one though, so this is once a spill has occurred, if you want to prevent it from getting to your drains or your outlets, you would put these in place. Some of them are more permanent, but the ones we're looking at here are all temporary. You also want to have erosion and sediment controls, and this is again really big on construction site. So something I see the most common is, yeah, they've done a good job, they've put up their silt fencing, and then they didn't look at it again. And so the silt fencing is deteriorated, it's damaged, the sediment has overtopped it and led to a collapse like we see in this bottom photo. So it's not going to help anything if it's not actually doing its purpose. So that's something that you need to check pretty regularly as a control. Another option is to grass sediment or cover it with something that is permeable to water, but prevents site runoff like we see on the left here. Another big thing, this is more for your facilities where you have parking areas or a lot of impervious surfaces. You want to make sure that you're minimizing these. That's because if you do have stormwater, it all builds up on site and sheet flows off site if it doesn't have anywhere to infiltrate. So if you have grassy areas, it can go into the ground and go to groundwater and prevent stormwater flow off site. You also want to manage your storage piles. Again, I've mentioned a few times, you want to keep it covered. But it's important to know if you're getting from it often, you want to make sure that you're sweeping the area around it and keeping that area nice and clean. You want to have pads and berms related to it and tarps and enclosures if possible. And of course, if you're constantly using a pile, this is not something that you can do like in the bottom left corner, but when you're done with it for the day, that would be a good time to tarp it over just to be sure, or to maybe even berm the area around where you're working so that it doesn't go off site. Another big issue is waste, garbage, and floatable debris, and we see this everywhere. You want to have a lid on your garbage. Again, you want it to be sealed so that it's not leaking. We've got here 2 issues where a lot of leaking. They're overflowing their cans. It looks like the compactor on the left probably has an issue as well. So that's important to get maintained regularly. And lastly, be sure that you're preventing any dust generation and vehicle tracking. This is really important on our construction sites, again, because you have all of that sediment in bare areas. Some rumble strips at the exits is a really good way to do this, or riprap. It's also a cheap option just to shake off some of that sediment before you leave site. All right, lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about SPCC plans. So SPCC plans are basically spill prevention, control, and countermeasure plans. And these are more for our industrial facilities. This is a facility owner's operator guide to oil pollution prevention that I'm showing here. And you can, this resource, you can just kind of Google it, and the EPA has a really good guide for this kind of stuff. So this applies to very specific facilities. If your facilities have a completely buried storage capacity below 42,000 gallons, or your above ground storage capacity is below 1,320 gallons, then you do not meet these regulations. You have to have storage capacity above one of the 2 of these, and you're thrown into the category of needing an SPCC plan. And the thing about an SPCC plan is it's a standalone plan, but it also goes into your stormwater pollution prevention plan. So that's SWIP, saying that you are managing any of your oils on site. So again, yes, this is for oil, and it's important to note that the definition of oil under the SPCC plan doesn't just include your traditional hydrocarbons. Olive oil is one, any kind of food oils, anything that can cause a sheen on the surface of water is considered an oil. So if you have anything like this at a greater capacity, then that's when it counts. And it's also important to note that the containers with a 55 US gallons or greater are counted. So anything below this capacity are not counted as part of your total capacity at your site. So that's basically our 55 gallon drums that are so common or greater size. All right, so for an SPCC plan, the contents of it are our procedures, which are your preventative measures for oil spills. So preventing these from occurring. We've got our controls. So controlling the spill once they're released, so you can prevent the oil from reaching the waterways. And then our countermeasures are going to be your cleanup, containment, and mitigation of spills once they've occurred. And the SPCC plan does this through detailing the equipment, workforce, procedures, steps to prevent and control, and to provide adequate countermeasures to a discharge. So all of this is included within your plan. And a good summary of the plan, because we don't have a lot of time to get into all of it, you're going to label all of your containers on site appropriately. You're going to implement good storage and handling procedures. Your employees must be trained on the procedures to stop and clean up spills. We've seen sites where their procedure in the case of an accident is just to call someone. And this is acceptable, but the someone you call needs to have the procedures in place as well. So you have to have someone on site that knows what to do in the case of this kind of emergency. You also want to keep spill kits on site and in locations where spills might occur. And you want to notify any appropriate facility personnel when a leak, spill, or other release occurs. All right, so first we're looking at the labeling here. We see this a lot. If your label is faded or gone or out of date, that's an issue. And here we've got our flammables, but any other kind of hazardous oil substance, and including our flammables, would need a placard that shows the issues related to it. So if they're transport, then you want to have DOT placards. If you are on site, your HAZCOM communication labels are important to have. So one of the two. You also want to provide secondary containment for any stored fluids. This is required as a part of the SPCC plan. So if you have any type of oil on site and you're covered by the SPCC plan, you have to have secondary containment. And that's something that we see missing at a lot of sites. So there's some options here. We're looking at on the left here. Clearly, this is not a well-contained area. Looks like we've got a leak out of one of our above ground storage tanks. And it's possible that that leak is contained within the berm. But the other issue then is that our fueling stations here must be leaking. So either it's coming out from beneath the bottom of the berm or the fueling stations themselves are dripping out. Either way, that berm should have covered the fueling stations as well, so that any drips from them would be contained within the berm. We also, in the middle, have a very common thing that we see on site, which is these kind of pallet secondary containment that will hold the capacity of the 4 55-gallon drums stacked on top of them. We've got 3 here, but it would have room for at least another one as well. We also have the temporary dikes and berms. So if you're fueling or doing some kind of maintenance on your equipment, you want to put up a temporary one to prevent the spills from going any further. It's also important to make sure you're storing properly. So this is good. All of these are in secondary containment. I noticed that the fuel lines might be a little outside of the containment, which is not great, but they are all covered. So that is a benefit for your stormwater. If they're covered and it rains and you've got a leak, it's much less likely to be transported off site. We also have our spill controls. So culverting, gutters, or other drainage systems here. These could drain to a treatment center or an oil water separator. These are a good way to just kind of divert your materials into one spot to be contained that way. Another important thing, prevent your vehicular contact. This one on the left is awful. We've got our tanks, looks like one of them is not even sitting on level ground. And you can see that they're parking right next to them with no kind of block between them and the tank, and no secondary storage, unless these are double walled, which they don't look to be. So all of these are issues that could cause a leak that could be easily prevented. So one good thing is to have bollards. You can see here, they're one of the most valuable assets because they did their job. So you can see here, this one did a really good job at doing its job at some point and blocking something. All right, so one other big thing for an SPCC plan, when you properly label all your containers, you also have to label your waste or used oil. And this is going to include not only the container where you keep the used or waste oil, but the associated funnels, drips, and pans that are also collected. And anytime that you clean up an oil spill that is purely oil and no other hazardous material, that'll also go into the waste oil containers. And depending on your state, this could be called waste oil or used oil, is why I'm using them interchangeably. So just be aware that that could vary. And a big thing with this is it needs to be legible from 25 feet so it can be identified at a distance in the case of an issue or spill. All right, so when you get into the spill prevention and response, if your employees are responding on site, you would have to have an emergency response plan, and you would also have to train your employees on spill response. They need to know what exactly to do in the case of a spill. Here we can see that it looks like they're setting up some absorbent booms to channelize the flow possibly, or maybe they're going to close them off and contain the flow completely. It's important that you have your spill kits in all areas where the spills and leaks might occur. So anywhere you have a tank, you probably want to have a spill kit nearby. This spill kit needs to be checked regularly for damage. So you'll be checking to see if someone has taken out the gloves or taken out the absorbents, if they have deteriorated over time. A good way to do this is to put a seal on your spill kits. And I say seal and not a lock, because if it's locked and your employees don't have access to it, that's an issue. If it's a seal, you can tell if it's been tampered with and replace the materials as needed through inventory. And you want to include your spill kits on your site map, and these need to be in a permanent location that are identified in your site map. All right, so the main thing also with this, it is important. It's a best management practice. As soon as the spill and leak occurs, it should be cleaned up immediately. The materials should be properly contained and disposed of. And again, that'll be in your waste or used oil containers unless it's hazardous. And in that case, you might have some additional issues, like you can't clean it up immediately, and you'd have to actually get your emergency response team in to deal with that kind of issue. And it's important to know small spills quickly add up to big problems. And we'll get into what that looks like in a few slides. But as a part of this, if you do have a spill, you're required to notify. Who you notify, you want to let your designated facility SPCC coordinator know, any key facility personnel, the National Response Center, which is part of the U.S. Coast Guard, any cleanup contractors if you have someone in a response agreement, your state oil pollution control agency, any other federal, state, and local agencies that are required to be notified in your state, the local fire department and police department in the case it is a hazardous material, the hospital, and then other contact references. So if you have a water intake downstream or neighboring facilities that could be affected, you want to call them as well. So a reportable release of a petroleum-based product or oil is basically a spill of 25 gallons or greater to land. And land does include soil, asphalt, or concrete. It does not include if it spills within your secondary containment, unless that secondary containment is an earthen berm. In that case, spilling would be considered to land because it could get entrained in your groundwater very easily that way. For hazardous materials, it's dependent on the chemical and the material. And this is going to be located in 40 CFR 302.4, which is your EPCRA reporting requirements. And that's going to generally be reported by quantity or pounds, and it's based on the reportable quantity within the hazmat table. And notice I said caused a sheen on water for oils. The sheen rule is very specific. So it becomes a reportable release if it can cause sheen on water, and 1 drop of oil can cause that sheen. So that's very important to know that you could have something as simple as a drop of oil that needs to be reported. So it's important to prevent it. And a really good map here, this is of an SPCC plan map. They've shown here all the location of all their oil related tanks, drums, and storage. They're showing their drainage conveyances. They're showing where the drains go to. So next to the truck, the bottom left here, they've got a drain that goes to a sump that goes up to an oil water separator where it's treated. We're showing the storm drains off site, and it looks like those are underneath the property, so probably from the oil water separator out to the storm drain. But this is a really good way to display everything. And you can even see we've got some spill control equipment out here, and you can see from the legend there's 1 fire extinguisher close to the spill control equipment in red. So this is a really good way to have a map overview of an SPCC plan. All right, so just lastly, I've got 2 slides of some before and after. So this is taking into account both stormwater and SPCC here. We've got a maintenance shop that was really messy, clearly a lot of stuff exposed to stormwater, no secondary containment of their oil products. And then on the right, they've kind of cleaned up their act. They've moved a lot of stuff indoors. That becomes a no exposure because it's not outside. You've got your secondary containment for your oil containing material. And it looks like they've only got finalized products out kind of towards an area with no coverage, which is fine under the stormwater plan. You can have finalized products that are ready to sell outside. Another one here, this was a super easy fix. They just added a roof over all of their storage that was outside. So that prevents stormwater from getting to it, which is great. So those are just 2 examples of some things you could do at your site. And at this point, I'm finished. And if y'all have any questions, I'm glad to take them.
Okay, thank you, Kaylin. We have one question in the chat from Michael White. The inspection requirement for industrial permits is bi-weekly. This seems extreme. Can you explain why that is written that way?
Yes, so that is an inspection requirement for oil specifically, at least in Alabama. It's bi-weekly, and yeah, it is pretty extreme. But the issue is with a lot of maintenance areas and industrial facilities where you have a ton of transport going off and on your site, it's very easy for your trucks to be leaking and you not notice it. Your transport kind of connections to have issues. So this constant check, and usually it's someone on site as well for industrial. So this constant check is hopefully something you're doing anyway, just for good maintenance, but that's why it's required.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? We've got a question. Will we receive a PDF or PowerPoint presentation of this? I think what we usually do is we post this on our system and you can access it that way. Russ, have you got specifics about how we actually make this available?
Well, there are some limitations and some rules that we have to follow as an agency of the university for concerning accessibility. That's normally handled by Tiffany Blunt in our office. Tiffany is attending
Right.
the webinar, and I'm going to allow her to chime in if she wants to unmute. I don't know if she's camera shy or not, but
Well,
we do have a YouTube channel, but we have to go through an extensive process before we can make sure that those are available. Tiffany?
right.
Yes,
Well, I also know that when I've done this, basically if somebody sends me an email, I usually can give them the PowerPoint presentation I've done. So anyway, we'll go from there. But that's up to Caitlin too.
Randy is correct and Russ is correct. For the video, yes, we have to go through accessibility and it has to be sent to totally another process, but Randy could provide the PDFs to everybody who needed it.
Okay. Again, this is Caitlin's presentation. So
I am good with sharing it.
okay. And then we have another question. Do you have to keep items inside a building in secondary containment, and who regulates that?
There is no requirement, at least in Alabama, and I believe for the EP as well, because Alabama would be the more strict if there was going to be any. As long as it's inside and you've got a good seal on your building, you are not required to have secondary containment. I recommend it anyway, especially just those portable totes because they're kind of cheap. The pallets that go under it that can cause a secondary containment. And that way, if you do spill inside, and it's just so happened, maybe y'all try to pressure wash it out of your building or something like that, that would then be considered a stormwater issue. But no, there's not a requirement.
All right, thank you. We've also got a comment from Julie Bowen asking, I'd love to show this to my security guards. Will this class be repeated? The class isn't going to be repeated, and I think what they were just talking about, the availability for this on the YouTube channel is apparently Safe State has a YouTube channel, and basically it may or may not be available on that based on what Tiffany was talking about, accessibility issues. Anyway.
Yes, and in addition to that, we will offer, and we do offer a full stormwater course. It's a day-long course, and we offer a half-day SPCC course that's tacked on to it as well. We'll have another one of those in the fall, and you can just check our registration links on the UA Safe State website in order to be able to register for those.
Okay. We've got something from James Blankenship. Do spill kits come in different sizes to fit the AST?
Yes, they do. You can kind of order what you want. We've seen them where they're just kind of put together by people on site. So they might have what you saw there, like a rollable trash can that they put in all of their different materials that they'll need for their specific spills. You can buy pre-made big tote versions of spill kits as well. So just whatever you need, you should be able to find a good fit for it.
Cynthia is asking about our keeping on our mailing list. Basically, I think the answer is if you're on our mailing list, you'll pretty much stay on it. So anyway.
Yes, if you got an invite to this webinar, I was gonna say, if you got a webinar, invite to this webinar, you'll probably get our ad for the Stormwater and SPCC class when we do send that out later in the year.
Let me see, we got anything else? All right. That's all I've found so far. If anybody else has something, please come forth now because we're about to close out. Okay. All right, Julie, I'll see what we can do about getting you added to the mailing list. Okay.
And I got a question about giving my email. I'll drop it in the chat real quick before we leave. So if anyone would like to email me for more information about any of this or questions, you have it.
All right. And with that, let me see if we got anything else. Okay. I'm not coming up with anything else. So I want to thank everyone for attending. As always, we appreciate Kaylin doing this and coming forth. And, this is an intro. This is just a quick presentation. Like with any topic we do in these webinars, there's a lot more to it. So, we're here, we're available. Please call or contact us if you've got questions. And, there is courses that we're putting on that go deeper into this. That was what, Kaylin was referring to. But again, we appreciate your participation. We appreciate your time. And hopefully we will see you on May 5th when we're doing a webinar to tie into OSHA's National Stand Down for Fall Protection. So we'll be doing a section by Gene Wisdom of our group on fall protection basics and just an overview of that subject.
Kaylin, let me mention that your email address in chat only went to host and panelists, not to everyone. So our attendees I don't believe, have seen your email address yet.
Thank you for letting me know that.
Okay.
I guess we can leave it up for just another minute and then close out so they can get the email.
No problem. It's kjtw@ua.edu. It's kind of what we get into with a lot of this stuff is ours are pretty simple. Trying to see, sorry. So we'll leave that up for a second. Okay, sorry about that. And with that, thank you. And we look forward to seeing you next month, May 5th, fall protection. Thank you for your time. Good day.